Okay guys, after weeks of talking about it on my channel, I did it. I flew that airplane, the one that I'm standing in front of right there. What was it like? And after years of flight simming, did any of that pay off at all and apply to flying a real-life airplane? So come along with me and I'll tell you about my discovery flight and talk a little bit about the differences and some similarities between the sim and reality. Alright, I'll be up front right now and tell you I don't have video for this. My flight school doesn't have GoPros and stuff like that in the cockpit. And to be honest, I was really busy flying this airplane, so there wasn't really opportunities to take video, but I do have pictures. So I've got some pictures before and after the flight and during, when my instructor took the controls for a while just to let me get some photos. So I wanted to do this flight earlier in March, but it has been snowing and cloudy and gusting and raining. And yesterday was one of the first really nice days where it was windy, but the clouds were really high cirrus clouds, so it looked pretty promising. And I have to admit, I was pretty apprehensive about it. I wasn't scared, but I was worried that it was a discovery flight. I'd never been in a real Cessna before, a really small plane like this. So I know that I like aviation. I mean, you've seen this channel, but what was reality was going to be like? You know, was I going to get motion sick? Was I going to be afraid of heights? Was it going to be claustrophobic? I don't know. Have to see what happens when I get in the airplane. I knew it was going to be windy, so I had a feeling we were going to get, pushed around a bit. So all that's kind of swirling in the back of my head as I show up. So when I get there, I come in, I meet my instructor. He's older than me. He's been flying his entire life, from teens to his 60s. He's a retired airline pilot, flew 737s. He was in the military. He flew F-18s. And now that he's retired, he just wants to teach people how to fly. So awesome. Got somebody with a lifetime of experience. We do a pre-brief and we talk about some places we could go, like the practice area. And he whips out a sectional map and he's like, we could, if you live around here, we could go near your house. And I was like, I know how to read sectionals. Let me point out where it is on the sectional, which was kind of cool. So we plot that out. Then we grab me a headset. It's a pair of David Clarks. In my last couple of videos, I had Floyd, in the flight sim video, wearing David Clarks via Ahmad. And we head out to the hangar. And this hangar is awesome. This is an untowered field, and it's got this kind of vintage hangar. You'll see the pictures here. It's filled with awesome aircraft. So I'm just doing like plane spotting in the hangar right now, and I'm talking with the instructor. And from flight simming, I know all of the models of the aircraft. So I was like, there's a Skylane back there, and I see a 210 back there, and look, it's a Cardinal, So we're just talking about planes as they're getting our plane pulled out of the hangar. So after they tug our plane outside, we'd go and do the walkaround, and that was cool. I've done the simulated walkaround using the reality expansion pack, an X-plane, and it was exactly like that, right? Almost. Except, the reality expansion pack has things like, check that the rudder moves freely, but, this was much more detail. We're checking the rudder moves freely, but then we're looking at all the linkages where it attaches and making sure that nothing's broken. So we're looking in the cracks and crevices behind the ailerons and the flaps and making sure that there's no parts that are loose or broken or things like that. So we do everything you expect. We take the fuel sample. I get to do that. I climb up on the step ladder over the wing and unscrew the gas cap and look in at the gas. We do the full walk around, and then we get into the plane. Now, first thing that jumps out is the scale that I'm used to in the game, especially in virtual reality, I think is a bit off. So the plane is bigger on the outside than I expected. You could see the wing is really about the top of my head level, so I barely have to duck to get under the wing to get in. Getting into the plane required some contortions. It's small inside, and it's very awkward to climb up onto the strut and get inside of it. And then I sit down into the seat. And for me, this is like such a cool experience because I was so apprehensive up to this point, kind of worrying about all these things. And then I get inside of the plane and all of that just melts away. I just want to fly the plane. And I just forget about everything that I was worried about. And I'm just so excited to be sitting inside of the plane. And I can't wait to do the startup and to taxi it and to take off and fly around. So from that point on, like, I was like a kid. I mean, I just can't explain it. I was just like having the time of my life, not afraid, not worried about anything, just enjoying every minute of it. And I'm telling you this because I've watched Ruskin Fly's channel. He got his private pilot license, and I went back and I'd watched his Discovery flight video, and his first Discovery flight, he almost thought about not becoming a pilot because he got airsick. He had, just wasn't a fun experience for him. And he had some really good words of wisdom about how Discovery flights were about discovering something about yourself, and he decided to do another Discovery flight and then became a pilot. So it kind of helped me get past the apprehension of doing it, and I had such a relief when I got in the airplane, and like I said, it just melted away. It was like nothing, It's like, how was I ever concerned about this? So if you're feeling apprehensive too about taking this first step, just keep that in mind. I felt that way too, and it completely transformed when I got in the plane. So now this is like the first big moment where it's a sim versus reality thing. So I'm sitting in front of the panel, and it's almost identical to the model that we have in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is an early 70s Skyhawk. I think the model in Flight Simulator is more modern. I don't know what year it is. So most things are the same. And, we get ourselves all situated, and he has me grab the checklist, which is in the pocket to my left, and I'm doing the checklist. I'm doing the whole checklist, reading the items and doing the items. And he's like, do you know where this gauge is? Because he already had an idea that I knew some stuff coming in from flight simming, because I talked to him about that. And I was like, actually, I think I know what all the gauges are here and all the instrumentation on the aircraft. He's like, all right, let's test you. Name them. So I go and just rattle off every single thing in the cockpit. Just blaze through it all. I'm naming not only stuff on the panel, but like I'm pointing to the outside air temperature gauge, that's up in the upper right, the ELT. And I get to the end, he's like, okay, you even know what the course deviation indicators are. I wasn't expecting that. I was like, I told you, I'm a nerd. I'm like a flight sim nerd. And because of that, then it was just awesome, because I'm doing the checklist, I'm reading it to him, but I just know where everything is, so I'm doing it all. I'm like, carb heat, gold, okay, and I touch the carb heat, and he's nodding, and we go through the whole checklist, and then it's time to get the weather, and he dials into the frequency that I'm expecting, because I've flown virtually, right, around my home airport. So I've got my headset on, and I could hear it, and he's writing it down on his pad, and as he flicks it back off, I go, okay, I heard the winds are 330 at 10, and altimeter, 3117. He's like, dialed in. So I just go right to the altimeter and dialed in, and then we check that, it's reading versus the field elevation. And it was cool. It was one of those things that you want as a simmer, where like the stuff that you've done in the sim is directly translating and making it easier for your flight. Now, the funny thing is, and this is like the best example of the disjoint between simulation versus reality, I can name everything inside of the airplane, but when it came time to fasten my seatbelt, in particular the shoulder harness, I had no idea how to do it. So, know all the instrumentation, can't fasten my seatbelt without assistance. And the seatbelts, there's a lap belt that's exactly like the type that, you have on a commercial airliner. But then there's a shoulder belt on this model, and it's not like a car shoulder belt. You don't pull it out and it retracts. It's just fixed, and it doesn't click in. So I was like perplexed where I'm supposed to click the end of it into, and really it's just got a hole in it like your car seat belt does, but instead of clicking into something, there's a peg that sticks out of your lap belt, and you put it over the slotted hole, and it just kind of stays in place that way. So can't fasten the seatbelt on my own. So we started up, and I'll tell you, it sounds nothing at all like the simulated engines in any of the games I've played. I would love to hear authentic engine sounds in the game. It sounds awesome. It sounds like an engine, right? So we talk a little bit about taxiing, and this is my fear. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be awful at taxiing with rudder pedals because I have zero experience with them. So we start taxiing, and I am awful at taxiing. I am, I'm like, it looks like a drunk person is trying to taxi the airplane. I'm, painting a S-shaped curve that's going back and forth around the yellow line, kind of veering off and veering back on, and he takes the controls and kind of gets us back on center line, and I try again. Now, by the time we got to where we're going, I finally figured out that to do work the pedals, you're constantly working the pedals. You're kind of doing like left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right to keep it on center line. And my initial thought of step on the left pedal and go left, and then make a correction and step on the right pedal was way too slow. It's more like you're tap dancing on the pedals to keep everything lined up, and you're stepping on them. They take a bit of force, right, to push down with your feet. They aren't like the Nordic track plastic things that we have for Flight Simulator that slide up and down. You step and press down on these. So we get all lined up on the runway, and guess what? It's me. So from this point on, 95% of the flight is me at the controls. So I take off. And I was a little concerned about managing the rudder pedals, but it actually got easier once I start getting up to speed because the wheel kind of stayed, in its centered position. And we rotate off and we go up. And as we go up, it's such an awesome feeling. You're like, I am flying. And we're flying a left. We're making left traffic, right? So we're flying up, and we're doing a left base turn, and then a left downwind turn, and we're going to depart from the downwind. And that's all me. I'm making all these turns. So he's, trying to get me to get my airspeed to 80 because I was flying too fast, which meant the nose was too low. So bringing the nose up. So we had to keep working on that. But then once we exit the pattern, then we've got some mountains to fly over, and we're going to try to find my house. And he's like, do you know where your house is? Like, yep, I'm going to follow this road, and we're going to go over the mountains, and I've got a pretty good idea where it is. He's like, have at it. So I'm just navigating myself at this point, which I've flown in the sim. So that's a wild feeling. So the first thing that happens is he's like, hey, there's a athletic field up ahead. What school is that? And this is like, it feels like it's like a minute after we took flight. And I was thinking, there are no schools between like the mountain and my house. What school? And then I realized, oh, that's the school that's past my house. I was like, that came up quick. We're going in an airplane. We're going kind of fast. So we'd already flown past my house. And this is where I realized it's hard to spot things from the air. I mean, athletic fields, yes, are easy. But I was looking for like roads and houses. And we're at about 3,500 feet at this point. So everything looked the same, everything's still brown, kind of post-winter, and all the houses are little gray flecks, and the roads are an identical grid. And even though I generally knew where I was because we had lakes and reservoirs near us, so I knew my position, and trying to find my house and what street it was on was another story. So we got to practice some turns as I was looking for my house. And for turns, for flight simmers, I would say this is one of the probably few plane handling experiences that matched or was really close to the sim, where I think the sim helped me, because making turns really felt a lot like making turns in the sim, in particular in VR in the sim. When you make a turn in the sim, at least I do, I'll use the turn coordinator to help me to make sure that I'm doing a standard turn. And, you have to do some back pressure on your flight control to pull the nose up so that you're not dropping and keeping your altitude level. And that, it looked and felt exactly the same. The only thing that was different was you could feel the turn. And I think that actually made it easier because like in your butt, you can feel the turn because you're getting pushed against the seat a bit from the bank of the turn. Plus you could feel it in the flight controls, right? I mean, you're pulling on the yoke and the yoke is pulling back on you. You kind of feel like you're lifting up the airplane when you pull back on the yoke. So having that force feedback really, I thought, made the turn easier. And after we did a couple of these, my flight instructor's like, hey, I think you're doing really well in the turns. You're like a natural at turns. And I thought, I didn't say it, but I think the flight sim actually helped here, because that felt like what I'd practiced in the sim. We even tried a steep turn, and that felt totally normal too. That was cool. So he offers to take the controls so I could take some photos, which I do. So that's where all these came from, in case you're wondering if I'm taking pictures when I'm supposed to be flying the plane. I wasn't. He was flying the plane. And I take this selfie. I've cropped him out because I didn't ask him if I could use him on my YouTube channel. But he's a really cool guy. So then he says, all right, what do you want to do? We could do some more maneuvers out here, or we could head back and try some landings. I was like, oh, head back and try some landings. I completely want to try some landings. So we fly back, and he maneuvers us to get us into the downwind. It involved flying over some mountains and doing a pretty big turn to get on the downwind. And again, this was another moment that was so much like the sim, because once we get on the downwind, it gives the controls back to me, and I'm flying the downwind. And I look out the window and I look at the strut, and the runway is halfway up the strut, and the sight picture of where the runway was and where the mountain was off to my right, and the height of the plane and where everything was, it was like exactly the same as the sim. And I had this moment of, oh my gosh, this is blowing my mind. This is like I practiced for this, and here I am at this exact spacing and height and everything, and it's exactly what I was expecting. So that part was cool. Now flying the plane is nothing like the sim. Everybody always says this. I know it's not like the sim, except for turns. Turns were like the sim, but the throttle, I felt like I was fighting with the throttle often. It's very sensitive, and the plane really reacts to throttle changes. So you've got everything going on with the throttle. You're managing the pitch. We had wind going on. We had gusts going on, so the plane's kind of getting pushed around, and you're compensating for all that. So a lot of different things happening at once. So then we, for the first landing, he does the landing. He says, put your hands loosely on the controls. I'll do the landing. You can watch, and then we'll come around and you can do the next one. So he does the landing, gives me the controls as we're rolling on the runway, so I can do the takeoff. And we fly the pattern again. And we come in for the landing. So here's the big question. I know you're wondering, how does it work out? I've done a lot of simulated landings. Did I grease it? Did I nail it? And the answer is, I couldn't do it, guys. I tried. It was a little bit too much for me on my first flight. So we're coming in, and I was able to line up on the center line of the runway reasonably well. Now keep in mind, we've got a 10-knot crosswind, almost perfectly perpendicular to the runway. So we're kind of crabbed into the crosswind, and it's a little gusty. It's not bad. It's mostly the crosswind that's the problem. But between that and power and trying to get the pitch of the nose right, I think at one point I'm thinking, oh, we're going to come short. We're headed towards the grass. We're going to come short. And right about there, where in my mind I'm thinking, ground is coming up. He goes, okay, I've got the controls. So he bails us out, and we do the landing. And then I get to do the taxi back. And the taxi back actually goes much better than the taxi out. It's still not great, right? But I had the idea of kind of tap dancing on the rudder pedals to make little adjustments to keep us on center line. My turns still weren't very good. You really need differential braking, and you need to just get a feel for that, because the wheel only turns like 10 degrees with the rudder. So if you're trying to turn 90 degrees with a wheel that turns 10 degrees, you're going to need something else, like braking, to make that happen. And that was it. We do the shutdown checklist. I get to do that. And then we go in for the debrief. So you're probably wondering if I signed up for lessons right there, and I didn't. And it's not because I don't want to take lessons. It's because it's hard to explain how you feel after doing this. I'm like flying high on adrenaline, and I realized that. I was like, don't make any big decisions at this exact moment. Just digest this experience and think about it and decompress. And then when you don't have a lot of chemicals going on in your brain influencing your decisions, then give the flight school a call and bring your questions and figure out where you want to go from there. So I kind of reined myself in. If I just let myself go with my emotions, I'd be like, here's my money, sign me up. I want to do this again. In fact, when he ended up doing the second landing and not the aborted one, the one that I couldn't do, and we did the rollout and stopped, and I realized we weren't doing a touch and go. We were stopping because our time was up. I had kind of this, sad sinking feeling of, oh, it's over. I was hoping we were going to go up again and I'd get another try. And I realized I can have another try. That's what lessons are, right? So you can hear it in my voice. It's 24 hours later and I'm still like on top of the world from doing this. I'm so glad I did it. The apprehension that I had going into it sort of feels like a distant memory now. And if you are thinking about doing this, if you're watching my channel, I'll bet you're thinking about doing this. Who wants to watch me fly a virtual airplane for 45 minutes in VR half the times, unless you really like aviation and are thinking about flying yourself. So my advice to you is just do it. There's no commitment to a discovery flight. They're not even that expensive. Mine was less than a flight lesson, almost half the price of a flight lesson. So you can do it. If you decide, nope, not for me, you still get that experience, and you can also let them know what you want when you do it. When I came into it, he's like, what would you like from this flight? I was like, I would like to fly the airplane as much as humanly possible. I was very straightforward about that, but you don't have to, right? You can say, I don't really want to have my hands on the control very much. I just want to kind of get a feel for this and see what flying's like, and maybe I could do a turn or something, so you can do it at your own pace. So no video for this, just a lot of photographs. I'll keep you posted on what I decided, but I wanted to get this out there to you so that, you could kind of get a sense of the real emotions that I have coming out of the experience and hear what it was like. So thanks as always for listening, everyone, and stay tuned for further flight adventures.